Saturday morning cartoons didn't prepare anyone for this madness. The 1980s weren't just about neon and synthesizers. They birthed the darkest animated films ever unleashed on unsuspecting children. One movie literally made kids faint in theaters. Another got banned for being too violent. And Disney almost shut down their animation studio because of what they created. Which animated nightmares from the 80s crossed every line imaginable? Number 12. The Secret of NIMH, 1982. Don Bluth walked out of Disney, took 13 animators with him, and immediately made a movie that put Disney to shame. His debut wasn't some cutesy animal adventure. It was a psychological thriller about laboratory experiments, blood, violence, and character deaths. When Bluth pitched this to Disney, they rejected it for being too dark. Then they watched him make it anyway, and panic released The Black Cauldron 3 years later. Mrs. Brisby's quest to save her sick son leads into a world of genetically enhanced rats, brutal combat sequences, and themes about scientific ethics that most adults couldn't handle. The Great Owl scene alone traumatized countless kids. A predator who casually mentions he eats mice while helping one. Blood splashes across the screen during fight scenes. Characters actually die, violently. Critics called it scary beyond belief for a G-rated film. Rotten Tomatoes later listed it among the top 10 scariest animated children's films ever made. But here's the kicker. It was gorgeous. $7 million budget, made in Bluth's garage, and it looked better than Disney's $40 million Black Cauldron. The animation was so stunning that studios couldn't ignore it. When it bombed at the box office, pulling only $13.6 million, Hollywood blamed the dark tone. But cult status grew through VHS rentals. Kids who survived it became lifelong animation fans. Bluth proved animated films could tackle serious themes without talking down to audiences. Disney got the message. Their next decade became the Renaissance. Number 11. Heavy Metal, 1981. This wasn't just rated R. It was animated pornography disguised as science fiction. Based on the French comic magazine Metal Hurlant, Heavy Metal exploded every boundary of what animation could show. Space battles, graphic violence, full frontal everything, and a soundtrack that defined 80s metal culture. 6 interconnected stories all revolve around the Loch Nar, a glowing green orb that corrupts everything it touches. Each segment pushes further into mature territory. Den features a nerdy teenager transformed into a muscular barbarian in a world of scantily clad women and brutal combat. B-17 shows World War II bomber crews fighting zombies. Tarna delivers a warrior woman's story drenched in blood and vengeance. The production was insane. Canadian studio worked with American funding to avoid censorship restrictions. They hired actual adult film performers for voice work in certain segments. The animation quality varied wildly between stories, but when it hit, it was revolutionary. Computer graphics mixed with traditional cell animation in ways nobody had attempted. Box office pulled $20 million worldwide, massive for an X-rated animated film. It spawned sequel attempts, comic book tie-ins, and influenced an entire generation of animators. Video game developers cite it constantly. The midnight movie circuit kept it alive for decades. But parents who accidentally rented this thinking it was kid-friendly. Saturday morning fare nearly burned down video stores. This was animation for metalheads, stoners, and horror fans, not families. Heavy Metal proved animation could target adults exclusively and succeed. Number 10. Fire and Ice, 1983. Ralph Bakshi teamed up with fantasy artist Frank Frazetta to create the most adult-oriented sword and sorcery film ever animated. This wasn't Lord of the Rings, with a quest and moral lessons. This was testosterone-fueled barbarian fantasy loaded with scantily clad characters, graphic violence, and themes that made parents extremely uncomfortable. Evil Ice Lord Necron uses glaciers to destroy kingdoms while capturing Princess Tigra, whose wardrobe consists entirely of barely there bikinis designed to showcase every curve. Hero Larn runs around in a loincloth that leaves nothing to imagination. The rotoscoping technique made every movement hypnotically realistic, especially the more suggestive scenes. But the violence was the real controversy. Warriors get impaled, crushed, torn apart by monsters. The Dark Wolf character slaughters enemies in brutal detail. Ice zombies hack through armies. Blood flows freely. The MPAA gave it a PG rating somehow, but many theaters refused to show it during family hours. Bakshi and Frazetta were completely involved in casting sessions, specifically choosing actors whose physiques matched Frazetta's famously voluptuous artwork. The live-action rotoscoping sessions were basically soft-core photo shoots disguised as animation reference. Critics dismissed it as mindless eye candy, which was exactly the point. This was Frazetta artwork brought to life, complete with all the adult themes his paintings implied. It cost $1.2 million, looked incredible, and proved animation could capture fantasy literature's more mature aspects. Conan the Barbarian had made sword and sorcery profitable. Fire and ice made it animated. Number 9. Wizards, 1977, re-released 1980s. Bakshi's post-apocalyptic fantasy dropped nuclear war themes into a world of mutants, magic, and machine guns. Set after civilization destroyed itself, the story follows twin wizard brothers, good Avatar versus evil Black Wolf, battling for control of a radioactive wasteland populated by monsters, demons, and Nazi imagery. The controversy wasn't just the violence, though characters get gunned down, stabbed, and blown apart regularly. Bakshi mixed actual World War II footage with his animation, showing real Nazi rallies and concentration camp images alongside cartoon characters. He was making pointed statements about technology versus nature, fascism versus freedom. But parents saw swastikas in a cartoon. Black Wolf's army consists of mutant creatures wielding automatic weapons and wearing Nazi uniforms. The film's climax involves Avatar literally shooting his brother with a pistol after delivering a profanity-laced speech. Blood spurts. Characters die screaming. The apocalyptic landscapes show decomposing corpses and ruined cities. Production cost around $1.2 million. But Bakshi's rotoscoping technique allowed him to create epic battle scenes on a shoestring budget. He traced live-action footage of extras dressed as soldiers, adding animated monster heads and weapons. The effect was unsettling, too real for cartoon violence, too stylized for live action. Critics were split between praising its ambition and condemning its content. The midnight movie circuit embraced it, playing to college audiences who got the political commentary. But suburban theaters pulled it after parents complained about the Nazi imagery. Bakshi intended it as anti-war allegory. Audiences saw cartoon fascists with guns. Number 8. The Last Unicorn, 1982, Rankin Bass Productions, created what looked like a family-friendly fantasy about the world's last unicorn searching for her lost kind. Instead, they delivered existential horror about mortality, loss, and the death of wonder. Christopher Lee's menacing King Haggard keeps unicorns imprisoned in an ocean of despair while facing his own inevitable doom. The unicorn's transformation into human form is deeply disturbing, animated as body horror rather than magical metamorphosis. She loses her immortality, purity, and identity in scenes that feel more like psychological violation than plot device. Angela Lansbury's witch, Mommy Fortuna, traps legendary creatures in her carnival, forcing them to appear as mundane animals to humans who can't see magic anymore. Themes about aging, death, and the crushing weight of time permeate every scene. King Haggard's castle overlooks a sea where unicorns are imprisoned, transformed into waves that crash eternally against rocks. The Red Bull, a massive creature of flame and shadow, terrorizes characters in sequences that rival any horror film. Jeff Bridges volunteered to voice the magician Schmendrick for free because the novel was his favorite book. The production team included America band members who created a soundtrack mixing medieval folk with synthesizer music that enhanced the film's otherworldly atmosphere. Despite its G rating, The Last Unicorn traumatized children who expected typical fairy tale storytelling. The existential themes about mortality and loss of innocence flew over kids' heads, but hit adults like sledgehammers. Video stores constantly dealt with parents returning it, claiming it wasn't appropriate for children despite the rating. Number 7. Rock and Rule, 1983. Canadian studio. Nelvana attempted to create an animated rock opera for adults, and instead produced the most expensive animated flop in history. Set in a post-apocalyptic world where animals evolved human intelligence after mankind's extinction, the story follows anthropomorphic musicians battling a demonic rock star trying to summon actual demons through music. The villain Mock, voiced by Don Franks, is basically a satanic David Bowie who kidnaps female singer Angel to use her voice in summoning rituals. The climax involves literal demons emerging from hell during a rock concert while characters fight for their souls. Religious groups lost their minds. The drug references, occult imagery, and themes about music's corrupting power sparked protests. Production cost $8 million over 4 years, making it the most expensive animated film ever made in Canada. They hired Cheap Trick, Blondie, and Lou Reed to create original songs. The animation quality was spectacular, mixing traditional cell work with early computer graphics for the demon sequences. But nobody knew how to market it. Too mature for children, too weird for adults. The plot was incomprehensible without prior knowledge of rock mythology. Theaters had no idea what demographic to target. It bombed spectacularly, earning less than $100,000 in its initial release. MGM pulled it from theaters after 2 weeks. The studio nearly went bankrupt. But like many 80s cult films, video rental gave it new life. Metalheads and animation fans discovered it, turning rock and roll into a midnight movie staple. Its influence on later animated works is undeniable. It proved animation could tackle adult themes through genre storytelling. Number 6. The Black Cauldron, 1985. Disney nearly destroyed their animation department with this medieval nightmare that earned their first PG rating ever. Based on Lloyd Alexander's Chronicles of Pride Dane, the film was supposed to attract teenagers back to Disney. Instead, it traumatized children and confused adults with its graphic violence and horror imagery. The Horned King remains one of Disney's most terrifying villains, a skeletal lich whose goal is raising an army of undead warriors called the Cauldron Born. The resurrection sequence shows corpses climbing from graves, flesh melting off bones, and zombie soldiers wielding swords in battle. Jeffrey Katzenberg cut several scenes during post-production because test audiences were fainting. Production was a disaster spanning 5 years and costing nearly $40 million. The animation department was depleted after Don Bluth's exodus, leaving inexperienced CalArts graduates to handle Disney's most ambitious project. A 10-week animators strike delayed everything. Scenes were animated in wrong dimensions due to miscommunication about the 70mm format. The film featured Disney's first computer animation, holographic sequences that were scrapped due to cost, and 6-track Dolby sound. But technical innovation couldn't save the confused storyline that borrowed elements from multiple books without creating coherent narrative structure. Opening weekend pulled only $4 million, finishing 4th behind E.T.'s re-release and Back to the Future. Total domestic gross was $21 million against that massive budget. Disney executives considered shutting down animation entirely. The failure led directly to management changes that launched the Disney Renaissance, but the Black Cauldron nearly killed hand-drawn animation first. Number 5. Return to Oz, 1985. This wasn't the Wizard of Oz sequel anyone expected. Walter Murch's live-action fantasy starts with Dorothy receiving electroshock therapy for her delusions about Oz, then drops her into a nightmare realm where the Emerald City lies in ruins and evil. Princess Mombi collects severed heads in her castle. The Wheeler creatures, beings with wheels for hands and feet, terrorize children with their metallic screeching and predatory behavior. Princess Mombi's Hall of Heads, where dozens of women's severed heads scream in unison, created trauma that lasted decades. The Gnome King's rock transformation sequences used claymation that felt uncomfortably real. Disney panicked during production. They fired director Murch mid-filming until George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola intervened. The studio spent $28 million on a film they knew would disturb audiences. Marketing struggled to explain why this Oz sequel contained no songs, bright colors, or familiar characters. Fairuza Balk was only 11 during filming, but her performance carried genuine fear that translated to audiences. The practical effects, created without CGI, gave every creature and transformation weight that modern films lack. The darkness wasn't gratuitous. It reflected L. Frank Baum's original books more accurately than MGM's musical. Critics called it a horror show flying under the banner of family entertainment. Parents complained that children were having nightmares. Box office was disastrous, but Return to Oz found its audience through home video. Horror fans and dark fantasy enthusiasts embraced its gothic atmosphere and psychological complexity. Number 4. The Plague Dogs, 1982. Martin Rosen followed his traumatic Watership Down with something even more disturbing. An animated film about laboratory animals escaping into the English countryside while military forces hunt them as potential plague carriers. This wasn't family entertainment disguised as adult themes. It was straight-up adult animation that happened to feature anthropomorphic animals. The opening sequence shows graphic animal experimentation, including a dog being repeatedly nearly drowned to test endurance limits. Later scenes depict starvation, hypothermia, and survival cannibalism as the escaped dogs struggle to live in the wild. Military personnel discussed exterminating them with biological weapons. Based on Richard Adams' novel, the film pulls no punches about animal testing, environmental destruction, and government cover-ups. Characters debate scientific ethics while dogs suffer from experimental procedures shown in clinical detail. The violence isn't cartoonish. It's realistic depictions of what laboratory animals endure. John Hurt and Christopher Lee provided voices, bringing gravitas to material that could have been exploitative. The animation quality matched Watership Down's realistic style, making every moment of suffering feel authentic. No comic relief existed to lighten the mood. The film was never given an MPAA rating until 2004, when it received PG-13. Most theaters refused to show it, limiting distribution to art houses and specialty venues. Parents who assumed it was children's entertainment because of the animal characters demanded refunds. Critics praised its unflinching examination of serious themes, but warned audiences about its emotional impact. Number 3. The Adventures of Mark Twain, 1985. Will Vinton's claymation masterpiece about Mark Twain's journey to meet Halley's Comet included one of the most nightmare-inducing sequences ever animated. The Mysterious Stranger segment, based on Twain's unfinished manuscript, shows a demonic clay figure destroying miniature civilizations while explaining the meaninglessness of human existence. The stranger creates tiny clay people, makes them worship him, then destroys them casually, while discussing how morality is arbitrary and life has no purpose. He demonstrates war, plague, and various forms of suffering, before concluding that humans are merely dreams who think they're real. The clay figures melt and reform in disturbing ways that felt supernatural. Parents expected wholesome American literature brought to life. Instead, they got existential horror exploring Twain's darkest philosophical writings. The film bounced between lighthearted adventures and moments of profound despair. Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn witnessed the stranger's demonstrations without fully understanding their implications. Vinton's claymation technique made everything feel unnaturally organic. Characters' faces shifted constantly, creating uncanny valley effects decades before the term existed. The production took 3 years and pioneered new stop-motion techniques that influenced every claymation film afterward. CBS aired it as a family special, not understanding the mature themes embedded in seemingly innocent storytelling. Viewer complaints flooded the network. Teachers who showed it in classrooms faced angry parents. The film won awards for technical achievement, while traumatizing audiences who weren't prepared for Twain's pessimistic worldview. Number 2. American Pop, 1981. Bakshi's ambitious attempt to chronicle 4 generations of American music history through animation became his most controversial film. Following a Russian immigrant family from the 1890s through 1980s punk rock, the movie depicted drug addiction, organized crime, war trauma, and the music industry's exploitation in graphic detail. The rotoscoped animation made every scene feel hyper-real, especially sequences, showing heroin addiction, overdoses, and withdrawal symptoms. The third-generation character, Tony, becomes a junkie musician whose habit destroys his family and career. These weren't sanitized depictions. They showed addiction's physical and psychological devastation. Violence pervades every era. World War I trench warfare, Prohibition era, gang shootouts, Vietnam combat, and punk rock riots all receive extended sequences, Characters die violently throughout. The film's structure follows music's evolution through American tragedy and triumph, but emphasizes the human cost. Bakshi used actual music performances rotoscoped into animation, creating seamless integration between live action and cartoon elements. Bob Dylan, Janis Joplin, and other musicians appear as animated characters performing their actual songs. The technique was revolutionary but expensive. Warner Brothers marketed it poorly, not understanding how to sell an R-rated animated epic about music history. Critics were divided between praising its ambition and condemning its violence. It bombed theatrically, but gained respect through home video and revival screenings. Music documentaries still reference its innovative approach to visualizing American cultural evolution. Number 1. Fritz the Cat, 1972, re-released throughout 1980s. The first X-rated animated feature film kept getting re-released throughout the 1980s, shocking new audiences who'd never seen animation this explicit. Ralph Bakshi's adaptation of R. Crumb's underground comic strips featured graphic content that made heavy metal look tame by comparison. Fritz, an anthropomorphic cat attending college in the 1960s, pursues women, experiments with drugs, and gets involved with radical politics. The film shows explicit relationships, drug use, police brutality, and racial tensions without censorship. Every taboo subject gets explored through animation that made controversial content feel surreal but impactful. Crumb himself hated the adaptation so much, he killed off Fritz in his comics to prevent future films. He felt Bakshi missed the satirical point and turned social commentary into exploitation. The controversy generated massive publicity, helping the film gross $90 million worldwide despite its X rating. The animation quality was groundbreaking, mixing realistic character movements with exaggerated cartoon physics. Bakshi proved animation could tackle adult subjects seriously, while maintaining the medium's unique storytelling possibilities. Every boundary was crossed deliberately. Theaters showing it faced protests, boycotts, and occasional violence. Religious groups condemned it. Critics were split between recognizing its artistic achievement and condemning its content. But Fritz the Cat changed animation forever, proving cartoons weren't just for children. These films proved animation could tackle any subject. No matter how controversial or adult, they traumatized children, shocked parents, and forced the industry to reconsider what animated movies could be. Which one scarred you for life? Drop a comment and tell us whether animation studios should have kept pushing these boundaries or played it safe for family audiences. Because honestly, would you rather have sanitized entertainment or films that actually take risks?